All right, welcome to everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. Okay, so once again, sorry for the restarts on this, but here we go. I should be good to go now. I got my bottle of water to help out. So this is a very important video because, as I've said 2 or 3 times now, but even I myself, who is, in case you don't know, I've spent 7 years on YouTube proclaiming that 2024 would be the end days, and I've got my books published. I keep forgetting to hold them up. I keep forgetting. No, hold on. Right here. They're 5 feet away from me, but I always get them here. So both my books are available on Amazon. This one here is about the end dates. 7 prophecies in the Bible where God detailed when it would happen. Okay, so this book covers them all. It's incredible, right? But those are published a few years ago. Now, anyways, right, despite all of that, and I've been heralding 2024 for so long, like, hence title of the book, right? Despite all that, I, just like everybody else, still has, we wonder at times, what if it won't happen? Even though the Bible says it's going to be 2024, it pretty much assures it's going to be, and it has to be 2024. We sometimes wonder, like, hey, what if it doesn't happen? Well, I want to say first and foremost, like I said many times before, I even mentioned it in my book there, that even if nothing happens in 2024, that is not your reason to give up any hope or faith or even belief in these discoveries. The simple fact is, there's too much in the Bible that has come true, right? And that's what this video here tonight is about, because the whole purpose of this video is to show people how in Daniel's prophecy, he actually foretold so many things that it came to pass in history that it would be absolutely foolish for anybody, whether a Christian or a non-believer, it would be foolish for any human being to ignore that evidence and pretend that it's not going to happen. Okay, because the evidence speaks for itself. Why should you believe that the end will be in 2024? Well, because of that evidence. That's what I'm going to cover in this video here, right? And part of the reason I'm doing this is because everybody else, including even people like me, who know based on the prophecy of Daniel and whatever else that it's going to be 2024, we all are human and we all wonder and doubt things at times, right? But the purpose of this video and this list of 14 things that Daniel accurately foretold in his great prophecy, this is going to show you, right, that it's going to alleviate any doubt that you have. This is just too logical. These are plain as day facts that I will state 14 things that Daniel said would take place in the future, and they took place. And a lot of these statements that he made have numbers, time periods attached to them that like specifically allocate them on the timeline, right? Which makes it even more impossible to fake. So, and the other thing I have to start off with this is that for a believer, we believe that Daniel wrote the book of Daniel, or somebody, who rightfully wrote the book of Daniel, God approved, wrote the book for him, even if it was a little bit later or whatever, right? Most believers believe that and are content with that. Now, non-believers, skeptics, they'll say, oh, no, it was just a charlatan who wrote that book, and it was probably written like 100 or 200 BC, right? Well, even if that's the case, right, it's proven that the book of Daniel is at least from about 200 BC. It's probably a lot older, right? But Daniel lived around 600 to 540 BC. That's roughly when he was doing his thing, as the Bible records. Okay, so whether Daniel wrote it or somebody a bit later, it doesn't really matter, and it shouldn't really to a believer, because at the end of the day, like I could point out logically right here and now, the simple fact is, whoever wrote that book, with all the prophecies that it laid out in there, whoever wrote it actually wrote prophecy, because those things that were foretold came to pass, even on the years that they were supposed to. Now, that would be impossible for a charlatan to pull off. Now, a charlatan might be able to guess, oh, Israel will be rebuilt in the future, and, oh, I'm seeing a great battle, some obscure things. And he might get one or two things right if he writes a big book full of predictions. You know what I mean? But a charlatan could not literally map out 2,000 plus years of future history with major events, not just saying, oh, a war will break out. I mean specific, like some of the most important events to take place historically for Israel, okay, and in some senses even the world, okay. These aren't just obscure things. These are very highly specific things that Daniel foretold and many of them with dates essentially attached to them when they would occur. Okay, and they came to pass. Now, that is impossible for a charlatan to pull that off. A charlatan could not get all those predictions on a purposely plotted timeline correct if they were a charlatan. So that's my point. Whoever wrote the book of Daniel, it was probably Daniel or somebody got approved because it was bona fide prophecy, whether you like it or not. And that's what the point of this list is. These 14 things are what Daniel foretold and all came to pass. Now, a lot of people overlook these things, but it's very important to compile them in a list and look at them together so that your brain can digest the logic here, right? Whoever wrote the book of Daniel predicted, and this is just a portion of everything that's talked about, but these 14 specific things are verified events that did come to pass in history. He foretold them accurately. So this is what they are. And even for the greatest skeptic out there, the only one that you could strike off the list is the very first one, because I listed them in order. The very first one, if as an uber skeptic you want to say, oh, it wasn't Daniel who wrote it or a contemporary near his time, it was somebody dubious, a charlatan, hundreds of years later in like 1 or 200 BC. If you're an uber skeptic who wants to say that, then the only one out of this list you could strike off would be this very first one. Because if you are correct in that it was some bogus charlatan hundreds of years later, the only things out of this list of 14 predictions, prophecies, the only one that you could strike off the list is the first one, because it's about the rebuilding of the temple. Okay? Now, if whoever wrote the book wrote it after the second temple was constructed, then yeah, they would already know, well, hey, the second temple has already been built. Let me write a book and pretend it was written earlier. You see my point? But the thing is, that's the only one out of the 14. The very first one in order of when they occurred is the only one you could strike off the list, because the very next events took place 200 years about after what even the uber skeptics claimed when the book of Daniel was written. So an uber skeptic would say the book of Daniel was written around as recent as 165 BC. Well, guess what? Even if it was, that is still about 200 years from the next events in the list in order. Okay, so no matter who wrote it, because we know from the Dead Sea Scroll copies that it existed in 100 to 200 something BC, at least we know that, right? So it, no matter who wrote it, is prophecy, whether you like it or not, that came true. That's my point. So now that I've drilled that home enough, that took way too long. This is the events, right? So the very first one is that he foretold that the temple would be rebuilt, right? Meaning when Cyrus and all them made the decree to rebuild the temple, but also Daniel foretold the rebuilding of Jerusalem, both street and wall. This was something specific to King Artaxerxes much later in about 457 BC. In 457 BC. That's the official year of the decree. Historians confirm it. Okay? Now, each of these 14 things are confirmed by history. These are not obscure things or anything like that, right? So the first one is that the temple will be rebuilt. So like I said, this is the only one you could strike off the list if you're an uber skeptic, because you would just claim, oh, it was written after the temple was rebuilt, okay? Or after Jerusalem street and wall was decreed to be rebuilt in 457. Even if you claim that, this is the only one you could strike off, because the next one is Daniel foretold the arrival of the Messiah. Okay, now this is what I mean by an apex event, uber important event. Like, of all the things in Israel's history, even from a biblical perspective, one of the greatest, biggest things that would ever occur in all of Israel's history would be the arrival of Messiah. Okay, I'm pretty sure anybody from Judaism probably say that as well. You got the Exodus, but I'm pretty sure the arrival of Messiah and the Judgment Day would trump that in terms of significance. Okay, so he foretold one of the greatest spectacles and things to ever occur. Now, that's a big, bold claim to make. Now, it's all fair and dandy for somebody to claim, oh, Israel will be rebuilt one day. And maybe if you wait long enough, maybe it will be one day, and you could claim, oh, well, the prophecy was true, right? But this is something a lot more specific. This is an individual person. It's way more highly specific than just saying, oh, the land or the nation will be rebuilt one day, or even the temple will be rebuilt one day. This is something specific about a very certain, specific, and powerful and important individual, and that they would arrive. Now, not only that, but Daniel this is all from God, of course, the prophecy and the dictation. But Daniel was told when this would occur. Now, he wasn't told when Messiah would be born, right? But he was told when Messiah would die. Okay, and he wasn't told how old Messiah would be when he dies. But the simple fact is, he was indirectly saying, and this is complete logic, this is not me reaching here, right? If he's telling you that the Messiah is here and that Messiah is opposed and that Messiah dies, then obviously he has indirectly told you that Messiah has arrived. I mean, of course, you know what I mean? So he foretold that the Messiah would arrive. Now, this is very, very important. Now, you could make that prediction as a bogus prediction, but wouldn't it be something if that actually occurred? Now, Judaism doesn't believe Jesus was Messiah, but every Christian does. And we as Christians believe that, yes, well, he did accurately foretell that the Messiah would come. And he foretold the Messiah would come 483 years after Artaxerxes' decree, which would mean, sorry, not come, but would die 483 years after the decree, which means that the Messiah died in 26 AD, or that he would have. Okay? So even from the perspective of Judaism, I would like to. I've always wanted to argue, but I don't get to debate with the rabbis. But even in the book of Daniel, it says the only decree you can take it from is Artaxerxes. Historians even agree, right? So 483 years later is 26 AD. So even if you don't believe Jesus was Messiah, then what Messiah did die in 26 AD? You know what I mean? If it wasn't Jesus, it was someone walking around in his days. You know what I mean? Because that's when Jesus was walking around and living and dying, was around 26 AD. But anyways, so Daniel revealed that. Now, the fact is that it did come to pass. That's what every Christian understands, right? So Messiah did come, and he did die in and around 26 AD. Now, we obviously don't have Jesus's yearbook that says, "Oh, hi, I'm Jesus, and I'm going to die in whatever year it is." We don't have any books from history that say that, but we do have the mass from the book of Daniel. And any historian would agree that Jesus did live and teach, like he was at his peak age and teaching, like after baptism and all that, around 26 AD. And I don't think there's any historian that would say that 26 AD is an implausible date for his death. Okay, in fact, the widest range for his claimed year of death spans from 26 AD up to around 32 or 33. So it's not a very broad range, anyways. We're only talking about a few years. So the simple fact is, Daniel foretold Messiah would come. Messiah did come. Okay, so that's a big claim to make. But then again, a skeptic could just say, well, how do you know Jesus was the Messiah? But we're not getting into that argument here. And plus, that's just number 2 on the list of 14. The next thing that he foretold is that the Messiah would die. Now, this is something striking because in Judaism and in, commonly in Jewish belief, in certain circles, it's a bit different, but commonly, what they believe is that when the Messiah comes, he's not going to die, right? The great Messiah does not die according to Jewish belief. So, he's invincible, he has, long lasting or everlasting life, whatever it is, you know what I mean? He can't be killed. That's one of the primary reasons they rejected Jesus in his day and to this day is because he died, right? And because he died, they believed that proved he wasn't Messiah. So they really believe that Messiah is going to come in and not die. So for Daniel, as a member of Judaism and Israel back then, to be making this claim that the Messiah would arrive but yet die is a very bold claim. Now, today, Judaism will often say that, oh, well, the book of Daniel was never a prophet. They actually say that. Whether it's an attempt to minimize the prophecy of Daniel and its connection to Jesus, I'm not going to go there. But the end of the day, Daniel did make prophecy, give prophecy. It's the biggest prophecy in the Bible, and it came true. So I would say he is a prophet and he gave prophecy. But I think they say it because he wasn't speaking on behalf of God. So technically, I think they're correct, right? But he received visions and he was relaying the visions, right? So technically, I think they are correct. But arguably, no, he's a prophet. He gave prophecy, right? So anyways, my point is that to claim that the Messiah would also die, that's a tremendously that claim is tremendously contrary to what Jewish belief commonly always believed. Okay, so for him to make such a claim, for a charlatan arguably to make such a out there claim about the Messiah that, oh, I'm going to tell you when Messiah is going to be here on the earth and tell you the year exactly when he's going to die, that's quite a preposterous claim to make, unless it's actually true. You know what I mean? But the thing is, we can see with Jesus, yeah, like I said before, we don't have the yearbook that details when he died. You know what I mean? We don't have death books. So yearbook's the best thing I could think of, right? But 26 AD is entirely plausible. Plus, also, if you check the seismological records, science proved that there was an earthquake in 26 AD in that area. Okay, just like the New Testament says occurred at his crucifixion. I'm sorry, at his resurrection, I think it was, not crucifixion. Either one, right? So they're only 3 days apart anyway. It still took place in 26 AD. So for him to make such a bold claim and for it to actually come to pass is quite astounding. Okay, and that's not something that a charlatan would make if they're trying to make a sincere effort to just be a charlatan and delude people, and convincingly. They wouldn't make up something so obscure. I mean, why would they? You know what I mean? They would make up something that Judaism would be would easily take in, not something like, oh, you're going to tell me that the Messiah is cut off and died. That's why they refuse to believe that verse is talking about Messiah dying. They argue about, being cut off means he stopped being king or he stopped being priest. And they say it wasn't about the Messiah. That's how, in my opinion, they belittle it. But nonetheless, whether you like it or not, it does say Mashiach, anointed one, and he is cut off. So, like I said, we know the year from Daniel, it was 26 AD. So, if it's not talking about Messiah, or if Jesus wasn't Messiah, then which anointed one was cut off then? Which big important high priest? I mean, it's ridiculous. Why would Daniel foretell some obscure nobody in 26 AD when you got Jesus the Messiah walking around? I mean, you can't ignore that. But anyway, so he foretold, not predicted, the arrival of Messiah. The Messiah would be here, and that he would actually be cut off, that he would die in 26 AD precisely. And this came to pass with Jesus, confirmed by the crucifixion darkness miracle that was witnessed by a multitude of different nationalities and nations, even non-Christian, right? So we have that. But this is only like number 2 and 3 on the list. So the next thing that Daniel foretold accurately was the destruction of the second temple. So think about this. He's foretold that the first temple is going to be rebuilt. Therefore, it's going to be the second temple, right? He foretold it's going to be rebuilt, but he also foretold that it would be destroyed. Okay? Now think about that. Again, this is a very, you could say, out there claim, wild claim for some charlatan just make up, right? But it would make sense if it's true, because all of it did come to pass in history, right? But for a charlatan back then, 160, 200 something BC, like the skeptics would say, for a charlatan to make such bizarre and out there predictions that go completely contrary to what Judaism was commonly thinking would occur, why would you even make up a prophecy like that? All of these logical observations point towards that Daniel was giving real prophecy from a real God, and they really did come true, as history shows, right? So, like I said, he foretold the destruction of the second temple and the fall of Israel, not just the temple, but the fall of Israel. And not just that, but that these things would occur. He didn't exactly specify when, but soon after the Messiah's death. Okay? So, if we look in history, after Jesus died, we also got those 3 miraculous omens that even Judaism, who don't believe in Jesus, recorded in their own books back then. And they said 40 years before the fall of the temple, which will put it 40 years before 66 AD, which would make 26 AD, which would have been the year Jesus died. So the New Testament says when Jesus died, the temple veil was rent. I think that is when an earthquake happened, but in either case, right? But it says some certain things happened, right? Well, Judaism itself, like Israel, they recorded themselves in their own texts at the time that there were divine but ominous omens from God that occurred 40 years. Now, they didn't mention Jesus died the same year. I don't think they would want to, right? It wouldn't help their cause, what they believe, right? But what they do say, and they have lectures where they talk about this, and they say, oh, it has nothing to do with Jesus. Jesus just happened to die the same year, but he's not the Messiah, so it's irrelevant. Right? But the fact is, Messiah died. All these miracles occurred. And they recorded that the continual flame in the temple, which is also the continual sacrifice, right? That Daniel talks about as well. Because God said, if that flame ever goes out, you will cease to be a nation afore me. And people always overlook this. They always focus on the animal sacrifices and this and that there, right? That continual flame was very important. Now, after Jesus died, for those 40 years, like they testify, Judaism says that the continual flame kept extinguishing itself. And every time they tried to light it, they'd be there, like trying to light it, it would keep going out. It wouldn't stay lit. That was a sign that their nation would cease to exist. Okay? Literally, that's what God says in the Tanakh, in the Torah. If the flame goes out, you will cease to be a nation afore me. Well, they couldn't keep the flame lit. That was their 40 years warning that their nation would cease to be, which did happen 40 years later in 66 AD. But the other signs were that on Yom Kippur, the thread that they would put on the scapegoat would usually miraculously, if they deserved it, would turn white, meaning God forgave their sins on the day of Yom Kippur. However, if God didn't forgive their sins, it would remain scarlet. That's how that whole procedure worked at Yom Kippur. But for those 40 years, the divine omen was that it never turned white, meaning that God, for those 40 years, had rejected, not rejected them, but, in a sense, rejected them because they weren't worthy. He didn't forgive their sins in that sense, right? Not rejected them outright, but rejected their, appeal, or you know what I mean. And the third sign was that the temple doors, I think to the Holy of Holies, but the temple doors would open and shut by themselves. So they're supposed to stay shut. Only certain people are allowed to go in there, I think, even under penalty of alleged death, right? According to the law, if I'm correct, right? I'm pretty sure I am. So these temple doors opening and shutting by themselves is a pretty bad sign, right? It shows that it's not sanctified. It is holy, but you know what I mean? It's not holy. It's not sanctified anymore. The sanctuary is not enclosed, right? So those signs occurred when Jesus died, 26 AD, 40 years before his death. Now, you can't deny those facts there. But anyways, so all those things were foretold by Daniel, meaning Messiah dying and all that there, the second temple falling, and the fall of Israel. Okay, so those things came true in history. So Daniel foretold that. Okay, so this is just 3 things off the list so far. And we can see that these are pretty ultimate claims to make, right? I mean, imagine, Babylon fell in history. At some point, whatever it was in history, the kingdom of Babylon collapsed and it ceased to be a nation, right? We don't have Babylon anymore. Can you imagine if one of their prophets said, oh, Babylon will be restored, right? And it was restored. Whoa, wow. Okay, well, you could consider maybe that Babylonian prophet was correct because their nation actually got restored, right? But when you look at the other religions in the world, you don't see other religions making prophecies and predictions and forecasts like you do in the Bible with Judaism and Christianity, right? And the thing with the Bible prophecies is that they come true. So you don't even see this to start with in the other religions. And where they do prophecies, trust me, they are nothing in comparison to Bible prophecies. Bible prophecies have all come true and lined up with history. So that's a sign right there of where the true God is and all of that, right? So my point is that we don't even see other nations such as Babylon making claims, especially ones that come true, big, bold claims like, oh, our whole nation will be, resurrected again. It'll come back to life. Our great glorious temple, the most important monument on the planet to them, that it'll be rebuilt. We don't see those type of predictions, especially ones that actually come true from anybody else. But in the Bible, we had Daniel saying that those things would transpire, and they did transpire, that the temple would be rebuilt, but also that it would be destroyed. Okay? And it would be destroyed by an army who would come in after the Messiah is cut off, after the Messiah dies. We know that Rome did rule the region at the time. They're the ones who put Jesus to death. But nonetheless, I think it was Titus came in and decided to overthrow and destroy the temple, and they overthrew Israel. So that's when the nation of Israel fell. Okay, so Daniel foretold that. Right now, next on the list is that Daniel foretold that kingdoms would then, because remember, these are in order of when they occurred in history. Daniel then foretold that kingdoms, various different kingdoms, not just one, not even just one or two, but that numerous kingdoms would trample over Israel, doing their own thing for a period of time before a final beast kingdom would conquer Israel. And I'm not going to give a whole lecture on what beast kingdoms are, right? You got to know what they are to understand in this video. Sorry, I'm not going to keep sidetracking, right? But he foretold that a final beast kingdom, a final great empire will come in, which will conquer Israel, and it would rule for 1260 years. Okay, so Daniel isn't just foretelling that a big bad nation will come in, keeping it very obscure, like a Nostradamus prediction. No, he gave pages of specifications of what this final beast kingdom, well, a page roughly of specifications of what this final beast kingdom would do. Very specific things, which all came to pass in history, right? So he didn't just make an obscure comment, oh, a big bad nation will rise up and take over Israel. Anybody could predict something like that. And maybe it would take place over a span of 2,000 years. The thing is, he specified a lot of specific details about this final beast kingdom, one of which is that it would rule over Israel for 1,260 years. Okay? That's a big, bold claim, but yet it did come true because Islam conquered Israel in 640 AD. And from when they built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount in 688 to 1948, when Israel was reborn, and I think it was called the Arab War, the result of that was that the victors won and Israel was reborn, and the Islamic Empire lost its grip, its dominion over Israel. Okay, so, oh my Lord, I thought I heard my motorbike getting stolen, but it was my fridge turning on. Oh, my heart leaped. Oh my God. Anyways, sorry. It almost sounded like my bike riding off in the distance. Anyways, so he foretold that kingdoms would trample over Israel. So after Israel falls, which will be soon after Messiah dies, okay, the kingdoms would trample Israel for a period of time, unspecified how long. And then a final beast kingdom will come in, which will rule Israel for 1,260 years. Well, we did see this happen because Islam ruled over Israel for longer than 1,260 years. Okay, so that definitely did occur. There's been no other kingdom ever that ever ruled over Israel for that length of time, period. The only one that ever has was them. Okay, so Daniel foretold it, and it did come to pass. But there's more detail. So the next thing is that he foretold that specifically the 11th king, which means from the start, he says at first 10 kings rise up, and then there will be an 11th who is unique and does something specific and makes them especially dastardly. Okay, but this 11th king of the final beast kingdom, he says in chapter 7, would mark the start of that 1,260-year period of rule. Okay, now the 11th ruler of that empire, Islam, okay, was the 10th caliph. And the 10th caliph is the one who built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount in 688 AD, which is exactly 1,260 years from 1948. So a perfect historical fulfillment. So Daniel was correct once again with something, a very grand event to predict. You know what I mean? Very specific with the years and with the numbers, but yet it transpired. Okay. And with the 11th king, I mean, these are very specific things, but yet they came to pass. Okay. And then finally, the final beast kingdom, he said, would build the abomination on the Temple Mount. Okay. Now, long story short, like I already said, this was the Dome of the Rock. Now, of all the other contenders for this, there has been nothing that compares to the erection of the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. Nothing compares to that as a candidate for the abomination. Why? Because the biggest and baddest thing that had ever been put upon the Temple Mount before that was a statue of Zeus. Okay? And also, where they, did bad things to the people and made them corrupt the sacrifices. But in terms of building something on the Temple Mount, it's just a statue of Zeus. I mean, even Israel themselves, the Bible details it. Many times they're building altars, the, Asherah poles and all this, and putting those things, I think, even in the temple. So many times Israel did it. Many times foreign nations did it. Many different nations over history did that to Israel, even in biblical history time. Okay, but that's my point. Nothing else. All the other contenders are just statues of different deities that were put in the temple. And you have to remember that Rome built the Jewish temple. They finished. Oh, I just have an itch. Sorry, nothing gross. they helped build the second temple. So that second temple that they did later defile with their Roman statues and whatnot, they still built the temple, right? So as a contender, that is nothing in comparison to this other empire coming in, eradicating the remnants of whatever remained on the Temple Mount, because they have their own interpretations of why the Temple Mount is special, and I won't get into that. Okay, and then they erect an entire gigantic monument to a new and unheard of deity upon it. Okay, that is the best, most fitting candidate for the abomination out of all other historically verified contenders. So, by all logic and common sense, the abomination would be the Dome of the Rock. Okay? And that religion opposes Judaism and Christianity. I own a Quran. Okay? It's on my bookshelf. I know for a fact what it teaches. So, don't tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, because lots of people think they know what it says and they never even bother to read it. Okay? It teaches that the Jews corrupted the Torah and Tanakh, and it had to be rewritten. Okay, that's why they rewrote the Bible as the Quran. Okay, and it even says those things in the Quran. Okay, so they had to receive the true word. That's, they not only rewrote the law, meaning the Torah, the Bible, the books itself, but they rewrote literally the laws of God. Okay, they wrote a new law system of laws that replaced the Jewish laws. Okay, and even the Christian laws. So they did. How much more contrary could it be? And I won't get into all the other details of how strongly they oppose. Anyway, so my point is it's not just the building upon there. It represents all of that opposition, a direct violation of, what was taught to Moses. Don't ever worship a foreign deity. Don't let the names of other deities and gods come off your lips. It was very, very enforced command in the days of ancient Israel, right? And then with the Dome of the Rock, it's a monument, a whole building, a temple to a foreign deity, a different deity that claims it's the God of the Bible, but has a different name. It's a different concept. It doesn't act the same way as the one true God. It does a lot of dark and bad things and tries to justify it as good. It rewrites the Bible, rewrites the law. It contradicts God and the Bible in so many ways. There's no way you could say it's the same one God. Okay, it's a foreign God, a new and unknown deity, a new religion that came in upon it. Okay, so that is why it's such an abomination. But anyways, but Daniel also foretold, specifically in chapter 12, that the abomination would be built 1,290 years after the continual offerings were taken away. Now, the continual offerings were taken away many times in Israel's history. However, when you're talking about biblically mentioned and critically important ones, well, we have the first and penultimate one, which is Nebuchadnezzar, which is recorded in the Bible and verified by history. Nebuchadnezzar came in 602 BC and ransacked the temple, took away the temple implements, and they weren't able to do any of the offerings. Okay, so he literally took away the continual offerings in 602 BC, and that was exactly 1,290 years before Islam would build the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. Okay, so Daniel accurately foretold that. Again, these aren't just meager events; these are grand, once not even in a lifetime, but once in a nation's lifetime events with years and numbers specified, but yet Daniel got it right and they came true. Okay, so on the list so far, how many have we gotten? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we've got another 6 to go. We're just about halfway around through the list. Okay, Daniel then foretold as well that the final beast kingdom would change the law of God, which I kind of already mentioned, right? The next point, that's not a meager thing. Now, Rome never did this. Rome never rewrote the Bible, did they? No. Greece never rewrote the Bible. Babylon never rewrote the Bible. None of those things ever happened. In fact, under Babylon, the Babylonian Talmud was written, which in Judaism is a well-respected Jewish text. And it was written, whilst under the arm and rod of Babylon. So nonetheless, right? But the point is where was I on this point again? We changed the law of God. So none of the other beast kingdoms changed the law of God, but Islam did. Literally, they literally rewrote the Bible purposely after claiming that Judaism and Christianity corrupted it and corrupted the truth from God, and it needed to be retold. That is the ultimate fulfillment as a contender for changing the law of God. I mean, it doesn't get any more true to the word than that. Okay, so next, Daniel foretold that the final beast kingdom would erect temples to their God. This is in chapter 11. They would erect temples to their God, who is a new, unknown God previously unheard of. Now, Allah was not heard of before that religion with its founder rose up. Okay, it was unheard of. And if you read the history about the origins of the actual and factual history, okay, even their own records of their own origin history, okay, you will see that it was a revelation to their founder and it had to be proclaimed to everybody. And everybody denied it at first. Even his own friends and family didn't believe him. So eventually, some of his friends and family believed, and they gained more followers and so on and so on. I'm not here to give that history discourse. Okay. But that's why, because it was new revelation, nobody had ever heard that name before. I'm pretty sure he actually invented the Arabic language. I don't know if that's just a legend or if it's true. It might actually be true. He claimed he wasn't able to read, so I'm pretty sure he actually says he was shown this language and how to write it. But anyways, whether that's true or just a legend, the point is that all of this, originated through their founder. It was not known prior. There wasn't any tribe worshiping Allah before all this arose. It was a new and unknown God. And in the law of Moses, you see you should never worship a God or let the name of another God come off your lips. All these new and unknown and various other deities. Okay, so that's the first problem there. Okay, now, but what Daniel foretold is that there would be temples. Think about this. In the thousands of years of history, right? He wasn't just saying that there are random temples built by various nations. He's saying that this final beast kingdom, okay, and remember the 11th ruler of this final beast kingdom would mark the start of 1260 years and how that was fulfilled. So he's not been random in any of this. He's been very specific in these predictions and what he's been foretelling, right? So don't forget that. So he's saying that the final beast kingdom specifically would erect temples to a new and unknown God. Now, Islam did do that. However, Rome and Greece never did that. Rome and Greece and Babylon and the Medes and Persians always worshiped their same deity pantheons that they had for thousands of years. They never changed. Okay? Islam was a new religion with a new concept of God, a new name for God, a new text for God in everything. Okay? So what Daniel foretold was a very grand, huge, spectacular historical event. The type of thing that would only take place like once in 1,000 years or so. You know what I mean? Like a grand event. Okay? And he's very specific about it, and it came to pass. Daniel also foretold that the final beast kingdom would be the greatest. I didn't quote the words here for this one, but he essentially says it would be the biggest, the baddest of all the beast kingdoms. And we can see that this is definitely true. I mean, Rome, people commonly think Rome was the final beast kingdom in error. But Rome, at its greatest extent, if you look for yourself on the maps, the extent of their empire, it looks like lipstick around the Mediterranean. Okay? It was like the top of Africa, a little bit of the Middle East and all that, and just part of Europe. Now, if you compare that to the Islamic Empire, okay, the Islamic Empire, I don't know exactly how big, but visually, it looks like it's 5, maybe 10 times as large. It's a lot larger. They conquered way more peoples. They were bigger and badder than Rome ever was or wished they could be. Okay, so when Daniel foretold that the final beast kingdom, which would rule for over 1260 years, but that there would be this distinct measure of 1260 years, okay, distinguished by the abomination, okay. But anyways, he's saying that would be the biggest and the baddest. And he said 3 times that it would be different from all the other kingdoms on the earth and different from all the other beast kingdoms that he aforementions. Okay, now Islam was a brand new religion. which became a brand new culture, okay, and a culture of its own and everything. Brand new empire, brand new everything, brand new deity, okay, which claimed to be the same one old deity, but you know what I mean? Everything was new. So everything that Daniel foretold about this final beast kingdom so far, all this very specific criteria has come true. None of this criteria applies to any other kingdom that verifiably in history did these things. Like similarly, there's nothing similar, or one could speculate, oh, well, it could apply to this other kingdom. No, nothing else is comparable. When you look at all the specific things that Daniel details about the final beast kingdom, there's many different things, right? I don't have all of them in my list here. Many different things that he specifies, right? But nonetheless, moving on. Daniel also foretold that the empire of the final beast kingdom would stumble towards the end of time, right? But not fully full. Like it wouldn't cease existing because it gets destroyed by God and Messiah's arrival, right? But he says that the empire of the final beast kingdom would stumble, but not fully full, and it would lose its grip and rule on Israel 75 years before the quote end, the end of days, as God terms it, right? But Daniel says its people, the final beast kingdom's people, would mingle amidst all the other peoples around the world up until the arrival of God and the Messiah at the end. Okay, Daniel actually said, because I did write it as how Daniel presents it, so I should be more specific. But its people would mingle amidst all other peoples up until the arrival of the resurrection at the end, right? Resurrection in Michael, because in Daniel chapter 12, he doesn't say in chapter 12 Messiah is arriving, so I don't want to mislead people. Daniel chapter 7 says the Messiah would arrive, but at that point there, he's not. Well, he does actually talk about the final beast kingdom chapter. Anyways, I'm overcomplicating things, so let me shut up. But this again is a very specific thing. Daniel is specifying that the final beast kingdom would rise up. It would rule for longer than 1260 years, but there's a distinct phase where it will rule over Israel for 1260 years, marked at the start by an abomination and marked at the end by the reverse of all of this. And that actually happened. So in 688, you got the Dome of the Rock. 1948, 1260 years later, we have the ingathering, Jews and Christians, the people of God returning to Israel. Why? Because Israel's been reborn. Okay, so that's a perfect fulfillment, right? But Daniel has been even more specific than just that. He said that, hey, after that, there's still going to be another 75 years, he says in chapter 12. Okay, and it's during this period of time that the final beast kingdom will still exist, and its peoples will end up migrating, going around and dwelling amidst all the other peoples in the world. And Daniel also talks about this in the early chapters of Daniel, where he's talking about the statue vision. And he says, this iron kingdom, which is the final one, he signifies that it's the two legs, two strong legs, like iron, right? But then he also says it's like, the feet and the toes, the little toes, all the way up until the end of the statue, because he starts at the top, the very end of the statue would be the tip of the toes, right? And he says that the final beast kingdom, it progresses from being these two firm, strong legs to, just being these little twinkly toes at the end, the little tips of the toes. That's showing and implying that, they were standing tall and strong as the beast kingdom ruling over Israel. But in the very end, they would collapse a bit, but they would still exist. And their people and their concepts and their beliefs and their forces and even their empire would still exist, but it just wouldn't rule over Israel as it once did. Okay, and it would persist up until the end. So this is what Daniel specified. And for 75 years after this, because after the 75 years, the end, which is 2024, according to the maths, will come. So what we see in history is that this came true. So after the rebirth of Israel, and with the advent of technology, trains, airplanes, and boats, and all of that, and migration and human migration around the world, we do see members of that empire and religion now being all around the world. And we see, just like it says, that the clay, they will mix with the clay. This is when it's talking about the toes of the statue prophecy. Jesus talks about how the tares will be sown amidst the wheat, which is probably the same allusion, maybe differently applied, maybe not. Maybe is talking about the same application. But Daniel in other places in his chapter says that the beast kingdom would fall, but it would still persist up until the end. Okay, so again, why would a charlatan make such overly specific details in their predictions with numbers attached? Why would they go through all this? But anyways, simple fact is, a true prophet did write the book because it was prophecy that all came true. All of this came true in time when it was supposed to the exact digit. So, I mean, you can't make that stuff up, right? And the final points. Daniel foretold that the final beast kingdom would oppose and fight against the people of God from the very start of the final beast kingdom being established until its very, very end that I just talked about. After it falls, but it still persists, they will still resist and oppose the people of God and God up until the arrival of Messiah himself. Okay, so this is what Daniel also foretells. Now, this is the step that we have to wait for. Okay, so right now, the prior step that I mentioned has come true. It's been 75 years now since the rebirth of Israel. So what Daniel foretold in that point on my list here did come true. So the only ones that have yet to come to pass um, are these last ones, right? This last one or two, right? And because we have to wait for the arrival of Messiah to come in 2024 or soon enough. So that's the last thing to wait for. Now, my final point is that my final observation is that what is more fantastic? This is for anybody being skeptical in mind. Like, what is more fantastic? You're a person like me. I want to believe it's 2024. I firmly believe the Bible and the prophecy of Daniel and the other prophecies, like I show in my book, prove that it's 2024. I mean, there's 7 different prophecies. Not all of them are in Daniel that prove it's 2024. Like, I really believe that it should and will happen. But what if it doesn't, right? So if you're doubting and you're still skeptical and all that, just ask yourself, what is more of a fantastic, far out there, impossible thing? Okay, that all of these 14 things that I just methodically went through are foretold by somebody and that they come true, or that God will arrive with the Messiah at an appointed time, long awaited for, to judge the earth. Like, which of those two scenarios is more far fetched? Okay, that all of these 14 highly specific things that Daniel foretold, which will transpire over a period of well over 2,000 years after he walked the earth. Okay, well over 2,000 years. Is that more fantastic or less fantastic than making the prediction that God will arrive with Messiah to the earth to do a judgment? Like, because a skeptically minded person or an outright skeptic will say, oh, well, there is no God, or it's just ridiculous to think that God would come to this earth to judge us. Even if there is a God, why would he bother coming here and doing this big, silly, churchy thing to the world? I mean, this is what a skeptical mind will always say, right? But is that really more fantastic to say that, if there is a God, he might come to a planet or this planet or each planet, inhabited planet, maybe once every period of, every epoch, maybe? Is that really far more far-fetched than these 14 separate things that are highly specific? No, it's not. It is not more far-fetched. It's less far-fetched. It is less far-fetched, going by all common sense, to say, let's put it this way, it's more plausible and reasonable and down to earth that say that, yeah, there's a God who's going to arrive here with cohorts, whether it's Messiah, his legions, whatever. God and the forces of good will arrive on this planet Earth at an appointed time to do this judgment and save the good because the world's going to get hit by meteors. Is that really that far-fetched to believe? I mean, really? I mean, you could say it is, but it's far more far-fetched to believe that those 14 things could just be arbitrarily made up and all come to pass. So my point is that all logic and common sense should show you that those 14 highly specific predictions, which all came true to the exact digit year, to each their own, right? That all of them, what this logic shows you is that clearly the final thing in the list has to come true. If Daniel foretold 15 major historical things, 14 of them came true, the final one is going to come true, right? That's what I've said many times before. By all reasonable, sound, logical thought, even an atheist skeptic would have to agree that these 14 things were claimed by the author of Daniel, that they were written at most recent 160 something BC, which is still 200 years before the first events on the list. Okay, the arrival and the death of the Messiah in 26 AD. Okay, 200 years before that. So no matter who wrote it in 100 and something BC, if it's that recent, You see my point? When you factor all this logic in together, even an atheist uber skeptic would have to say that, hey, you are right. Somebody wrote it, even if it's that recent, and somehow they got these 14 predictions right. The atheist skeptic would have to agree and say that. And the thing is, most atheist skeptics are oblivious to these 14 things. They might have heard a few of them, and a few of them doesn't tantalize them enough, right? But this evidence, this logical evidence is so logical, is so reasonable and sound of mind that even an atheist uber skeptic, I think, could be convinced by it. But the shameful thing is that even the religious people and the Christians are just oblivious to it. They haven't taken the time to stop and dwell and think about this, just how great and how true Daniel's prophecy was. You get that many highly detailed things told to you that they're going to happen. Let me put it this way. Let me give everybody a little parable here. Let's just say you're going through a little hike in the woods, in the forest somewhere a couple hundred years ago, okay? And back then we didn't have GPS and phones. So you're walking around. I'm just seeing myself on the camera now because I was reading something. Sorry. So you're walking through the forest and then you bump into some strange, odd, but nice gentleman dressed in an interesting outfit with a pointy green hat and a feather in his cap. And he's playing a flute or something, right? And you bump into him and you say, "Oh, hello, mister." And he says, "Oh, are you looking for something?" Be like, "Yeah, I'm looking for blah, 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 this place." And be like, "Oh, I'll tell you how to get there." Okay? If you walk for 3 days' journey across this yonder hill in that direction towards that tree, then blah, 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 you get the point, right? And you listen to the guy and you arrive at the correct place. Let's just say it's a well. Okay. Oh, well, the guy was right. And then you continue your journey. This time you're going to try and find the castle that you're trying to visit. Oh, and what do you know? You bump into the guy again. He says, "Oh, what are you trying to find this time?" "Oh, I'm trying to find the castle." He says, "Oh, you want the castle? Well, you got to go over that hill heading towards that tree. Okay. And then make a left. And then you'll get to the castle. And then you're like, okay, well, he was right the first time. Let me follow him up on this one. So you go follow his instructions and you reach the castle. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess he was right twice in a row. Okay. Well, imagine if this happens 14 times, right? You bump into the guy 14 times. On the 14th time is where you've asked him, okay, how do I get to the supermarket? He's like, oh, well, you got to go over here and then blah, 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 blah. And you go do it and then boom. And you say to yourself, man, this guy is a great, helpful person, man. Like he properly instructed me 14 times. Now, here comes the last one, the 15th. You're going to the forest again. You're trying to get back to your whatever, your hotel. And you go up to him and you say, "Oh, hey there, buddy. Fancy bumping into you again. I'm trying to find my hotel. I'm a little lost this time. Do you know the way there?" He'd be like, "Oh, yeah, you just got to go over here." Same thing again. You got to go over here, give you the instruction. You should know by all reason, right? By all sound reason, you should know based on your experience with this guy that he has led you correctly for 14 times in a row. Now, don't you think that you have all right and reason to follow him to the last destination, which would be that? So, anyways, that's that. And take care, folks. God bless.